leaflet plus that thing, which I don't know that it actually had anything new on that sheet, but just more concise format. Advent is a roughly 4-week preparation, or I should say a 4-week period that comes before Easter. Now the first couple of weeks we actually focus more on the second coming of Christ, when he comes again in glory. The last 2 weeks we begin to focus more on Christmas, when he came the first time. It is a somewhat penitential season, which is the reason that we use violet or purple, because that's what that symbolizes, is penitential. Although we're not asked to do any fasting or anything of that nature. You know, some of the common traditions, I think I mentioned this in your handout, but you know, typically we have a wreath that has 4 candles in it, and a candle for each week. And the candles are not always, but usually violet, although the 3rd week is usually a rose or pinkish kind of color. That is what is known as Gaudete Sunday, which is Latin for rejoice. And you'll notice that the second reading always comes from Paul's letter to the 1 Thessalonians, where he exhorts the Christians at Thessalonica to rejoice always. So that kind of goes together. So in a way, Advent could kind of be likened to all of the Old Testament in a way. All that occurred before the coming of Christ with God's chosen people. So then he comes. God takes on human nature in Jesus. And that, of course, is Christmas. And Christmas, you know, in the retail season, it seems to get earlier and earlier. It's probably backed up to before Halloween now.
Last week.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The golf house is already decorated on Christmas. I was just there Monday.
Whenever it begins. It's pretty early as far as the retailers go. But the church doesn't see it that way. Technically, it begins at 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Begins the Christmas season.
How do they get the 4 p.m.?
Well, it's just like, you know, you have a Saturday evening Mass, which is really the Sunday Mass. But you can't have it earlier at 4 p.m. You gotta cut it off somewhere. And that all has its origin in the way that Jews celebrated Sabbath, which always began at sundown on the eve before.
I get asked that a lot of weddings, like at 2 o'clock or 2:30 wedding, why that doesn't count as the Mass for the weekend. But if it's at 7, it is. But, you know, it's like, it's at the time, but I never knew why the time.
Have you set the Mass time for this year for Christmas?
It's like a long
Nobody in the choir does.
I don't know why they don't know it's at 5 o'clock every year. I wasn't going to change it.
That's fine. Well, one of them said, well, it's always been at 6. I said, no, it's been at 5. They said, well, since Mass.
What, Christmas Eve Mass? Oh, it's always been at 5, hasn't it?
That's what my understanding.
I thought it had too.
Because I was
As far as I
asking,
can remember.
I was asking the choir practice last Friday about it, and they said, well, they don't know. I said, well, I see Father Holiday.
Yeah.
Well, that's 5 o'clock. Still think we probably ought to have another one, but it's
I wish I
okay.
had a midnight Mass.
They have one of those at home.
Or later, even, yeah.
For Christmas? We used to.
There's a lot of places.
They have
St.
St.
Anne's.
Anne's.
They
They
have
still have
everything.
it.
Just
That's
on
a
the
big
Friday night? I didn't know.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking St. Anne's still.
Because I went
Yeah.
So
last
Yeah.
anyway, we're not here to solve the Christmas mess.
That's right, that's right. Yeah.
We'll save that for another day. Anyway, it technically begins at 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve. And hence begins the Christmas season, okay? Christmas season, which the color is white, varies in length somewhat, just depending on how the calendar falls from year to year. So the first Sunday after Christmas is always a particular occasion we celebrate the Holy Family. The following Sunday, or the Sunday after January 6th, whichever, how it falls, is Epiphany. It used to always be on January 6th, but in our diocese, each bishop has a choice to transfer it, so ours is transferred to the following Sunday. Then, either January 12th or the Sunday following, depending how the calendar falls from year to year, is the baptism of the Lord. Okay, and that ends Christmas season. A lot of people think it ends at Epiphany, but it does not. It ends on the baptism of the Lord. Okay, and that also kind of serves a dual purpose. It's the end of Christmas season, but it's also the first Sunday of what we call ordinary time. Okay, and the color that we use during ordinary time is green. Okay, it has a little box, I think. Yeah, in your handout about the colors, a little green box. We enter a little short stretch of ordinary time and get started on it for a matter of weeks. Again, depending how the calendar falls in any given year, because it gets punctuated by first Lent. Okay? And the date that Lent begins, of course, is determined from the date of Easter, which is, let me see, it is the first full moon after the spring equinox. Is how the date for Easter. It's the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox determines the date of Easter.
So what's the earliest day that Easter can ever fall on?
Why
Don't
did
know.
that? Chair?
That's like Christmas mass, come on.
March 27th is about the earliest I ever.
That's what it is.
Sometimes in March,
It's March
yeah.
27th
Yeah.
next year. It's rather
That would
early.
be really early.
March.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to research the lunar cycles. I'm afraid I'm just not a astronomer.
Sounds like you just got yourself some homework.
I bet you'll be able to say you really quick.
Fortunately, I have no service.
So, this year that means, because Lent is a period that it lasts for roughly 40 days, roughly 6 weeks, up to the Triduum. And it is a penitential season. We go back to the purple or violet. And we are asked during the season of Lent on 2 days to fast from food, which would be Ash Wednesday and, well, actually it's not in Lent, but the other day is Good Friday. Okay? We can get into later what that means when we get closer to Lent. We're also asked to abstain from eating meat out of reverence for the day that Christ died, of course, on Friday. And so early on, it became a custom out of reverence. Plus, too, you got to consider that in the culture at the time, meat was kind of an extravagance. Poorer people seldom had meat. They ate plenty of fish, but they didn't have a lot of meat. It was much more harder to obtain and more expensive. And so that kind of factored into the equation, too. Anyway, we're asked to not eat meat on all Fridays during Lent. We'll talk more about all that later. Okay. So Christmas season, Jesus enters time, takes on human nature. He grows up in a human family, hence we celebrate Holy Family. We know the story about when the Magi come, which we always have that reading on Epiphany. And then when he reaches adulthood and begins his public ministry, what does he do before he really launches into it? He goes into the desert, of course, but then he's also baptized in the Jordan by John the Baptist. Hence, baptism of the Lord. And so then ordinary time is a time when we begin to focus on his public ministry. You know, the deeds and the words of Jesus during that time. So then we get to Lent, and that is a time in which we're preparing for the central mystery of our faith, which is, of course, his death and resurrection. And that's a time of preparation for that. So then we get to the shortest season, which we call the Triduum, which just means 3 days, is what it basically means, which would be begins, again, technically at 4 p.m. on Holy Thursday. And then Holy Thursday night, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and until evening on Easter Sunday is the Triduum. Okay? We'll talk more about this closer to time, but Holy Thursday is really, we're focusing on, well, there's several things that go on, but the readings will focus on Jesus giving us the gift of the Eucharist. And the reading comes from, the gospel reading comes from the Gospel of John and his account of the Last Supper, or part of it, where Jesus washes the feet of the apostles. Good Friday, we always read the Passion according to John, for obvious reasons, I think. And then Holy Saturday and Easter Sunday, we obviously focus, the gospel is always the account of the resurrection, depending on where we're at in the liturgical, in the lectionary, whose account we read. Okay, then we enter, so on Easter, we begin Easter season, which is a pretty lengthy season, 50 days. That color is white all during the Easter season. And it ends with Pentecost. Now your handout, I think, had a little boo-boo in it, actually. When it said, because the color for Pentecost is red, which is also on Good Friday. And it said that's because of blood. That's not actually, maybe in some ways that's true, but it's really, it does often involve blood, like certainly Good Friday. And we also, on a memorial of a martyr, where blood, red, so there would be blood involved there, but it's actually a special manifestation of the Holy Spirit, which of course has to be involved for someone to give their life. It's pretty tough to do. So I don't know if they're exactly right there. But nonetheless, Pentecost, and that is of course the coming of the Holy Spirit on the apostles. And it's really the birthday, we like to say, of the church. Then we enter back into, or we resume ordinary time. And that's where we're at now. It's a long stretch of ordinary time, goes all through the summer, all through the fall, until we get to the next Advent. Now there's certain occasions we celebrate during that stretch of ordinary time. At that beginning of that stretch, we always celebrate Trinity, for example, Trinity Sunday, then what used to be called Corpus Christi, or the body and blood of Christ. And then the end of it